Hello there, guys. This is DJ Gallup from Courageous Consciousness, and I am coming to you today, as usual, from the upstairs loft part of my tiny house on a very rainy, stormy day here in Knoxville. If you look behind me, you'll see there's a thunderstorm rolling through. Um, but that's not the reason I'm here making this video today. Uh, what I wanted to discuss today is something a little bit more serious. And I'm not going to lie, I was really second guessing myself a lot as to whether or not I should do this video at all. But when I first started this channel, my goal for this channel is to talk about spiritual development in very real ways. And I go to a lot of other people's YouTube channels, and they're wonderful. I mean, I love watching Aaron Dowdy and Victor Otto and Infinite Waters, and they are amazing, amazing video producers. But I wanted to create a channel where I would be reaching out to those of you who are kind of maybe starting down here, and who really want to move up. And so, what I wanted to talk to you guys about today was my suicide attempt last year. Um, so, it was something that I wasn't even very honest with myself about for some time. Last year was generally a pretty good year for me. I mean, 2018 was generally a pretty good year for me, but it was also a year where I had a lot of stress and quite a lot of anxiety. Um, I had a job, a really good job. It paid really, really well. I was a massage therapist in probably the best spa in Knoxville. And yes, we do have a lot of nice spas here in Knoxville. Um, but I found that job to be quite stressful in a lot of ways. It was certainly very tiring. And then I think it was about maybe May or June of last year, I actually had a client who sexually assaulted me at work. And I mean, I trust me, I know I'm a big guy and I can certainly, take care of myself. But it was a very, very scary experience for me. And and then not long after that, I had signed the contract to have this house built that I'm living in now. And the entire process from when we signed the contract in June until when we moved in the house in November, it was just one thing after another. It was just, I mean, we couldn't get a mortgage, the building wasn't going right, everything was delayed. We were trying to sell another house that we had in order to pay for this house, and it just was not selling at all. And so last year, generally, like I said, it was a great year in so many ways, but on the flip side, it was also kind of a bit of a stressful year. And I would say starting in about July of last year, I just started getting these really strange feelings. Now, I wouldn't say I was depressed. I wouldn't say at any point last year was I clinically depressed. I'm never that sort of person who just can't get out of bed and just can't get themselves up and about. Like, even if I sleep in, trust me, I will get up and I'll get out and about and I'll go to the gym and I'll go shopping. Uh, so it wasn't so much that I was feeling depressed, but I started actually feeling called to commit suicide. Like, I actually felt like there was something pulling me. It really felt like almost from my solar plexus. It felt like there was just this pull, like a cord or a rope. Someone was just pulling me to commit suicide, and I would say I put easily 100, maybe 200 hours of thought into committing suicide last year. Um, maybe more, maybe more. It would really come around in the morning. Almost as soon as I got up in the morning, it would be one of my very first thoughts of the day. And it would usually last up until about 11 a.m., maybe up until around noon. Um, and then for some reason, most of the time, it would kind of dissipate. Those feelings would kind of dissipate throughout the day. And by the end of the day, I'd be feeling just fine and normal. Um, and as much as I do with my own spiritual development, with meditation and mindfulness and going to sanghas and all these things and breathing, and I just kind of ignored it, and I don't think that was really the healthiest approach because that thought kept going through my mind, and that cord, that rope, that feeling that was pulling me toward it just got ever stronger. And as summer went into fall, and as fall went into winter, um, I think I started also developing some seasonal affect disorder in addition to all of these other feelings I was having, and things were just kind of going from bad to worse. Um, I remember thinking that, hey, once I get this house and I'm in and I moved in and I have all the furniture set up, I remember thinking to myself, maybe this thought will go away. Maybe it's just the stress of this whole process. And we moved in to this house in November, and it still didn't make that thought go away. All December, I felt terrible every morning. I felt like any morning I could have gotten up and committed suicide. So eventually in December, I sat down with my husband and I had a heart to heart with him, and I talked about it. And he was upset and I was upset, as you would imagine you would be about having these thoughts. Um, and of course, he was getting really nervous about it because on about Valentine's Day of 2019, he knew that he had a contract to go work in Africa with Doctors Without Borders. And so, of course, he was really concerned about trying to get me better, or at least on a more stable place, before he left for Africa. So we did a couple of things. So one thing that Rashawn, my husband, he had done in the past is there's this woman, and her name's Natasha. She's awesome. She Natasha Thompson, and she lives out in Clarksville, Tennessee, which is about 3 hours from us here. And she does this process called quantum healing hypnosis therapy, which is a process that was developed by a woman named Dolores Cannon. And the idea is that you can go and she will, put you into a hypnotic trance for about 4 hours. It's a fairly long event, and along the way, she records the whole thing, and she'll have conversations with your higher self and with your spirit guides, and it's a pretty interesting thing. So in December, Rashawn made an appointment for me and him to go get these appointments. And I would say it was actually pretty useful, because here's the thing. I didn't want to do the medication route. In the past, I have cyclothymia, which is kind of almost like a bipolar light sort of thing. And so I'm one of those people, I kind of have extreme highs and lows anyway in my life. Although that's been getting a lot better with my meditation and mindfulness practices. But, I've done the medication route before, and I just was not wanting to do it again. So I tried this quantum healing hypnosis therapy, and I actually got a fairly good result from it. And I'm actually going to do some more specific videos about what happened in those sessions in future videos here. But uh, ultimately, it wasn't enough. And even though it helped a lot and my thoughts dissipated quite a lot after that session, uh, I still would wake up, maybe now every other day or every third day um, with suicidal thoughts. And and this kind of all came to a head on December 27th. I was, up in upstate New York at my parents' house, visiting for Christmas time, and I had been having a really rough couple of days. I mean, Christmas at my parents' house is always lovely, and everyone is really nice, and I love my family. But um, I just there's something about that time of the year that just is really difficult for me anyway. And I woke up on the morning of the 27th, 2 days after Christmas, and I just was not feeling great from the get go. I was having those thoughts right from the get go. And so, I did what I normally do, and I went downstairs and I poured myself some coffee, and, everyone was sitting around in the dining room, and we were all talking. And I don't know why, but I got triggered, and I said, "This is it. I'm going. I'm going to do it." So I just quietly went upstairs and changed my clothes, and I kind of snuck out. Um, and I had put, like I said, I had put a lot of thought into my suicide and what methods I would use before, and I always had two thoughts in mind of how I was going to do it. Either one was going to be that I was going to sit in a car in the garage and just turn on the car from carbon monoxide poisoning. And the other method I had in mind was that I would drink a lot of alcohol and um, go in a ice cold lake, basically, and just hypothermia. And that was the method I was going to use on the 27th. So I left the house and snuck out. And the first thing I did was I drove up to our neighboring town, and I bought the biggest bottle of vodka you could buy. And then I started heading up. And we live, just outside of the Adirondack Mountains in upstate New York. And so I started driving up, and the first stop was the little town where we have our summer cottage, which is called Caroga Lake. And I thought maybe, the ice would be thin enough there where I could just go through. But it was actually fairly busy at Caroga Lake. There were a lot of people ice fishing. There were lots of people walking around. It was cold, but it was kind of a nice sunny day. So I parked my car, and I kept thinking about it. And eventually I decided that I was going to go up. There's this waterfall called the Potholers, and it's maybe about 15 miles north of Caroga Lake. And it's on the seasonal road that I could guarantee no one was going to be at. I knew no one would be at the Potholers at all. And so I started driving up to the Potholers. And all along the way, Rashawn had been calling me, and I was just sending his calls to voicemail. I had even actually sent him a couple of texts telling him that, what our bank passwords were, because he didn't know, and I always do all the banking for us. That's how far along I was. I was really, I was going to go do it. And then finally, I got just to the point where there's this one area where I know the cell phone service was going to cut out. And he called me one last time, and I took the call. And he talked me into coming back home. It took a little while. I didn't really want to, but I did end up coming back home. And he was really scared, and it was a scary experience. I kind of felt like I really could have done it that day, and unfortunately that's a fairly normal experience for a lot of people who are going through spiritual development. If you ever read a lot of authors, I mean, read some Eckhart Tolle, for instance, and a lot of other spiritual leaders have gone through the same sort of feeling. And thankfully, I would say the feelings have more or less completely gone away at this point. What really helped was that I actually ended up going back for a second session for that quantum healing hypnosis therapy, and a lot of stuff got released during that. So if you've never done quantum healing hypnosis therapy, and if you're feeling like you're having some sort of issues like this, of course, get medical help if you need it for sure. But um, you know, as a supplementary therapy or as a complementary therapy, you may want to consider quantum healing hypnosis therapy, because a lot of stuff that needed to get released got released during that session. And thankfully, also, as winter turned into spring, which is now turning into early summer here in Tennessee, um, you know, my mood has been improving too. My seasonal affect has certainly been going away. So, you know, it was definitely a challenging time, but I also see my suicide attempt as kind of a step along my road to my higher spiritual self. I, I was willing to give up this life to go, you know, to some other realm. And more than that, not only was I willing to, but I was really feeling called to doing it. Um, and I would say now I'm really glad I didn't, for sure, because I learned a lot going through those experiences, and those are things that I can definitely, hopefully, try and relate to you guys on this channel. So anyway, I'm going to sign off for now. I hope maybe that some of this helped you guys. I know I'm not the only one out there who has suicidal ideations, um, but certainly, remember that, this is actually a very common part of spiritual development. It's not the most pleasant part of spiritual development, but remember that spiritual development is not always a straight line up and up and up and up. Oftentimes, it's up and down and up and down and up and down. And so you just have to stick with it. But the benefits far outweigh the negatives. And so I recommend, whatever your spiritual path is, just keep following it and keep trusting in it, because it can actually help you get through a lot of troubling times, just like it did for me. So anyway, I'll sign off for now, and I'll be making more videos in the future, and I hope to see you guys soon.